For TigerDetails.com, Jerit Roser here with Wes Mitchell from GamecockCentral.com, the South Carolina site on the Rivals Network. Getting ready for this big matchup in Baton Rouge this weekend between the Tigers and Gamecocks, and two teams that the trajectory has gone kind of different directions. Rough starts for both. LSU still kind of reeling and now dealing with an injured starting quarterback. Meanwhile, South Carolina, some positive momentum and coming in off of that big win against Auburn. Wes, how are things going, man? And how excited were the team and the fan base to see that W, and what's kind of the mood heading into this week?
Yeah, man, things are good here. Obviously, it's been sort of a weird year for everybody from, the team, media, fans, everybody. But, yeah, everybody's hanging in there. And I think certainly for this fan base, they needed something positive to sort of talk about. The way they ended last year, sort of on a losing streak, and then started this year 0-2. It was kind of one of those things you start counting back and you're like, how long has it been since South Carolina fans have been able to wake up on a Sunday morning and feel, hey, my team won, the day before. So, and you know how it is. The message boards, everybody's sort of in a bad mood when you've got a losing streak. And, Carolina as a program, I think from coaches to players to even the fan base, really needed some positive momentum. And they beat Vanderbilt, obviously, 2 weekends ago. And I think everybody was like, okay, that feels good, but it's just Vanderbilt. So to turn around, get a little bit of momentum against Auburn, they're a team that's had their share of struggles as well. But just even from a perception standpoint, South Carolina had not beaten Auburn since the 30s. So that sort of tells you historically what a win like that means for this program.
Yeah, I did not realize that until I saw the stat or note or whatever pop up kind of late in that game. I had no idea it had been that long since South Carolina had gotten the best of that matchup.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where South Carolina didn't join the SEC until '92, so it's partially because of the fact they haven't really played a ton, and then with the way the schedules have rotated, I mean that was the first time South Carolina had played Auburn since 2014, I think. So it's sort of they just haven't rotated on the schedule, and they've been in some really tight, weird games, since joining the league. But for whatever reason, even when Carolina came into that game, maybe a couple times with a better team, it's like Auburn would find a way to beat South Carolina. So that obviously was big for them to go ahead and get that one out of the way.
Will Muschamp's a guy that, people that have been fans of the LSU program for long enough might remember him being a part of the staff years ago. And since he's been up y'all's way, there's certainly been some ups and downs. And you mentioned kind of that rough end of last season, rough start to this season, but there's also been some pretty big wins along the way. Where does this Auburn win kind of stack up with some of that in terms of just where this program is right now and the overall feeling of who this team is this year and kind of where this program is under Muschamp and company at the moment?
Yeah, I don't know if it's quite on level with beating Georgia. They're number 3, beating them in Athens last year. That's probably been his biggest win to date. But, I would say the thing about that is they turned around and other than, I think, beating Vandy, didn't really win another game last year after that point. So Georgia win was good for this program in a vacuum, but they weren't really able to build off of it. So I think the question is kind of unanswered. If they can come down to Baton Rouge and win a game and sort of build off of some momentum that they have, then you maybe could look back at this game at some point. We're getting ahead of ourselves and say it's sort of turned the trajectory of the program around. I think you go back the first couple of years that Muschamp was here, it's year 5 now. So you had 2 years where really the expectations were incredibly low. And they got to a bowl game in year 1 after just winning 3 games in Spurrier's last year, then won 9 games in year 2. And so really it was a situation where they had overachieved and then had a down year in year 3, and then the bottom sort of fell out the latter part of last year. And there's a multitude of reasons for that. Some of it was injury, some of it was not. So a lot of the fan base had really sort of, I don't want to say given up, but it was very down on the program, the way last year ended, the way this year started. So it is sort of a new life a new opportunity. That's sort of what we've been calling it, is now you have a chance to go do something this year and actually build off of a couple of wins. But it really only matters if South Carolina is able to turn around and go play well, at LSU, play well at A&M or against A&M coming up after the bye week. So it's really just about what they do with it, I think.
In terms of that and how you build moving forward coming out of these past couple of weeks for South Carolina, what have been some of the areas that they feel like are going well and they feel really confident and like they're where they need to be in those aspects of their game? And what has to maybe even improve from that? I mean, if they play the way they did against Auburn, do they feel like they come down to Baton Rouge and get another win against another set of Tigers, or are there some things that they left that one and feel like they know they've got to clean up to keep the ball moving?
Yeah, I think there's still a ton to clean up, man. They've been very, very good, I would say situationally, and that's something that Muschamp puts a ton of emphasis on. And I mean by that, third down efficiency on defense, fourth down efficiency on defense. I don't know if anybody's converted a first down on a fourth down all year long. So they've given up yards inside the 20s, but they've sort of buckled down when teams get in the red zone defensively. They've had some turnovers. Obviously, the turnovers against Auburn that they created were the difference in that game. I think offensively, this is not anywhere close to the most explosive, or most talented offense that LSU will face this year. They're much more about, hey, we know what we do. We're going to sort of come out, try to control the ball, run some clock. It's very methodical. They know what they are. And I think one thing we've seen is that under Mike Bobo, they've sort of found an identity. They're going to keep trying to run the football. A lot of times it's kind of been one of those things where the running game doesn't do much, maybe in the first quarter, and they just sort of keep at it. And as the game goes on, you see those holes getting a little bit bigger. And the big thing has just been they've scored touchdowns when they've been in the red zone. So I think situationally, even if the yardage numbers are like pretty similar every game, if you force field goals defensively and you score touchdowns offensively, you're going to have a chance. So it's kind of been one of those things. Honestly, it hasn't always been that pretty. They started out, they were down 9-0 against Auburn, and then we're down 16-7, and we're down going into halftime as well. But this team just sort of hangs in there, keeps battling. Even against Florida, they sort of just hung in there and stuck around until the end. So I think that's the MO. You're probably going to see another game, even if South Carolina controls the game Saturday. I'd be surprised if they could really just put LSU away. And similarly, if LSU sort of has control of the game, this South Carolina team has kind of found a way to just hang around and make teams fight it out to the very end, I think. So it's not flashy, but that's sort of how they have to win right now. I think that's the blueprint.
Yeah. On the flip side, LSU seems to be doing a lot well from a flashy standpoint, but struggling with some of those other components. On defense, they're giving up tons of yardage, but doing very well in takeaways and sacks. So I was joking, kind of boom or busted coverage has been the LSU defense so far this year. And for a guy like Shi Smith that I know a lot of folks down here have taken notice of, and I mean the rest of that offense, Kevin Harris is among the SEC leaders in rushing. How much, whether it be the players or the fan base, kind of licking their chops a little bit as they try to maybe improve some things offensively and see how much LSU has given up through 3 weeks for this Tigers team?
Yeah, I think, it's when you see LSU on the schedule, and I'll go from like a fan base standpoint. When you see LSU on the schedule, you're thinking you're going to play a great defense. Just in general, most years, like that's the perception around here, and I think across the SEC is you're going to see one of the more talented, probably a bunch of future NFL dudes, definitely NFL guys in the secondary every single year. And it's sort of startling, I think, when you see what LSU has given up so far on that side of the ball this year. So, again, I don't think, just being realistic, South Carolina is a team that's going to feel like they're going to go up and down the field on anybody. But the funny thing is, and I'm talking about it sort of realistically from a fan and media standpoint, but there is a weird level of confidence within this offense that I think Mike Bobo has been instrumental in sort of instilling that. And they sort of just know what they do. They don't really panic. Against Florida, which also had sort of struggled defensively, I think you saw some opportunities for South Carolina to actually sort of create some big plays. And that's been their, I would say, Achilles heel on offense. You know, they've been able to stay on the field, move the chain, stuff like that, but have not been able to sort of create those big 15, 20-yard chunks, right? Well, there may be an opportunity, I think you would say, if LSU hasn't cleaned some things up to create those. Probably a big storyline to watch in this game will be, you know, A, if those opportunities are there or not, but B, does South Carolina take advantage of them? Because other than Shi Smith, they've had trouble with some drops. Even Shi, as productive as he has been, has had some drops as well. So against Florida, they were taking shots down the seam and really had some great balls from Colin Hill, and there were drop passes. So I think it's sort of about, does South Carolina take advantage of what opportunities, as weird as it is to say, might be available there against an LSU defense?
On the other side of things, Myles Brennan was off to, a strong start as LSU's quarterback, filling the huge shoes that Joe Burrow left heading off to the NFL. But now he's out, and LSU will start a true freshman at quarterback for the first time since 2014, which did not go so well when Brandon Harris and company went to Auburn. And they'll be facing a South Carolina team that has a couple of corners that folks down in Louisiana know a little bit about, Joe Horn's son JC and Izzy Mukwamu, who, played some high school ball up the northwest corner of the state with Terrace Marshall Jr. What is kind of the outlook for the South Carolina defense, particularly now matching up against some unknowns at quarterback, some guys that are probably going to have some growing pains, but have no film on them at the college level, and just how to attack that and manage this? Barring a surprising comeback by Myles this week, a two-headed freshman quarterback situation for the Tigers.
Yeah, I think it changes the equation a bit. Obviously, South Carolina, just from their perspective, J.C. Horn has been awesome. Really, J.C.'s getting the recognition now he deserves, but he's been awesome for 2.5 years, and it's been more about him locking down his side of the field, not really being tested. Auburn and Chad Morris and those guys, for whatever reason, decided this is the day that J.C. Horn's going to get tested. And I think everybody around here is kind of just like, what? I don't get that thought process. So JC was able to make them pay for that. Now, Izzy Mukwamu, he's been banged up. He's had a groin injury. He actually missed the Auburn game. And, as y'all know, with trying to play DB with any type of sort of soft tissue injury can be difficult. So we'll see. We don't know yet if he will play on Saturday. I would imagine that's something that goes into, sort of a game time. How does he feel on Saturday? Johnny Dixon is a freshman that's filled in for him very, very well at cornerback and was one of their pretty highly recruited guys, a guy they liked a lot, and he's filled in and done a good job. But if you're LSU, you're probably going to try to test him and see, just how good is this kid? Can we get him off his game a little bit? I would imagine, last week they had Horn following Seth Williams around. Auburn also didn't do a ton to maybe try and get Horn off of him. So I know I saw Ed O said, we'll move Terrace Marshall around. So that little cat and mouse game, what can they do to sort of put him in spots where maybe by the rules of South Carolina's defense, JC doesn't end up across from him? I don't know, but that's probably a little something to watch there. As far as the rest of the defense, it's been sort of hit and miss. Like I said earlier, they'll give up some yards on you. The funny thing is, it feels from a perception standpoint like the defense has underperformed a little bit based on what we expected. Also, you look at the points per game allowed, and SEC defenses have not been what they have been traditionally. So you look, South Carolina's third in the conference in points allowed right now per game. But then the other part of that is if you play Vanderbilt right now, I mean, it's just very much well, LSU played them.
Yeah,
Y'all,
LSU played Vandy, and it hasn't helped their defensive stats a whole heck of a lot.
y'all, I mean, Vandy, whew, they are not good this year. They are so bad. So, I mean, that skews it a little bit for South Carolina, but still, I mean, I think you sort of need that perspective looking at the rest of the league. Carolina's defense has been solid, and again, it's been more situational. I think for them, the pass rush has really been there at times, and then other times it's kind of disappeared, which I know is probably always the case, but I think they need a little bit more out of that, especially against these two true freshmen, which I'm familiar. I actually saw it's Max Johnson, right? It's one of them. Brad Johnson's kid. I saw him at a Rivals camp in Georgia. I want to say 2 years ago, maybe. Obviously, he's a big kid. He can sling it. And I'm not familiar at all with the Finley kid. So I think, Carolina, they'll probably go back to the high school film and see. That's what they've done in the past. Just see what's out there, and they offered Max, so they'll be really familiar with him and sort of what the skill set is there.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested to see what kind of pass rush South Carolina can generate, both from the success that they're having and executing on their end, as well as LSU's offensive line has had some kind of ups and downs, as well as how much the weapons around these two young quarterbacks can help, because the running game has been something that LSU has been kind of lacking in most of this season. They went up to Vanderbilt and had some success with John Emery Jr. in that game, but other than that, it's been kind of a rough go. I don't think there's a running back on LSU's roster that is within, I don't remember how many yards, but of Deshaun Fenwick, South Carolina's second leading rusher down there at number 17 in the conference right now. And a lot of that was that one night up at Vandy.
Mm-hmm.
So,
wow. Yeah, that's weird for me to even hear that. And I'm I haven't completely sort of got the chance to dive into LSU yet, but so has the offensive line sort of been a big issue there? Or it's just sort of been up and down, I guess.
Yeah, I think the first game was kind of rough, and they feel like they've improved since that game against Mississippi State that everyone just kind of wanted to forget immediately. And so they've shored up some things, but still not been quite what they expected. It's been interesting because I think they were very optimistic about the offensive line and then the defense as a whole. And the defense has obviously struggled mightily, and the offensive line is maybe similarly to what you were saying about South Carolina's defense, just not quite been yet what maybe the expectation was going.
Yeah, I got you. And I think for me, man, both of these, based on what I've read and what you've said and what I know about South Carolina, I think both these teams have a lot to try to clean up. And I know Orgeron said they spent a lot of last week on just focusing on LSU, cleaning up things on that side. And South Carolina, they really, looking back at the Auburn game, there's a lot to clean up there as well. And I think that's for everybody. Obviously, nobody's perfect right now. And the more I watch of the SEC this year, I feel like it's like Alabama is up here, maybe Georgia in that spot right below them, and then I've got Vandy just way down here. But then all the other teams in the middle, I feel like it's going to be about who executes on that day, who avoids stupid penalties and mistakes, and for South Carolina, they're sort of limited. So they have to, their main playmakers on offense and defense have to play well. And it's sort of one of those things, there's not really a second or third option. Like Shi Smith has to play well on offense for their passing game to have a chance. J.C. Horn in the secondary, Ernest Jones, who we haven't talked about. Ernest Jones, that's a guy to watch, 53 on defense. He's probably one of the more underrated linebackers in the conference that doesn't get talked about as much, but watching him for going on 3 years now, really good player, and probably as much as as good as JC is, Ernest is probably the heart and soul of the defense as far as being the emotional leader, the guy that sends in all the calls and stuff like that. And he's a big part of what they do on defense.
We'll see how it goes. Just a few days away now, and as you mentioned, it seems like a lot of the SEC this year is kind of a toss-up on any given Saturday. So who knows, man? Saturday, South Carolina at LSU. Wes, appreciate you taking some time to talk about it, man.
All right, guys. Have a good one. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Again, he's Wes Mitchell from Gamecock Central for TigerDetails.com, Jerit Roser.